Over the last few years, I have noticed that more and more Black people are traveling or moving to Latin American and European countries as they hope to have a better quality of life and escaping racism. Well, there is no real escape of racism. Racism is a global system. Still, I always encourage Black Americans to travel and see the world for themselves. It's a great way to learn the truth about different people, cultures, etc. Here, we will listen to a woman who is sending a message to Black Americans thinking about moving or traveling to Mexico.
It's true. Black people will be discriminated against in a Latin American country. If you're leaving America to get away from discrimination and you're moving to a Latin American country thinking that you're not going to be discriminated against, you're wrong. I've been hearing a lot about people that have moved to Mexico and are complaining that they're being discriminated against in Mexico. Let me tell you something. Mexico discriminates against their own Mexican people that are darker shade than the rest of them. In Mexico, there's a lot of states that have very fair skin and blue eyes people. The people that have indigenous features, the very dark skin, the black hair, are discriminated against. So you coming to live to Mexico and think that you're not going to be discriminated against is a fallacy. This is not just in Mexico. It happens everywhere in Latin America. Black people are discriminated against. In Honduras, there's an entire community of Garifunas. And Garifunas have been in Honduras for hundreds of years. And to this day, they discriminate against them. They remove their land. Some of them even get murdered. It's a battle Garifunas have gone through for decades with Honduras, because Honduras to this day does not recognize Garifunas as part of being part of Honduras. And so I grew up looking at Garifunas as if they were subculture, subhuman. I'm telling you, you think that you're leaving the U.S. and moving to a Latin American country to escape racism? You're not escaping racism. And you need to understand that that's just the way things are. And it's very acceptable.
Like any place, there are some good and bad people anywhere you go. I have traveled and lived in different countries. What I have seen is that many countries, whether they are Latin, Asian, European, etc., racist behaviors are mainly covert actions, activities that are hidden or concealed, or overt actions, activities that are open, more in your face. Years ago, as I was on my journey of learning Spanish language, I used to watch several Spanish TV programs such as Sábado Gigante, Despierta America, 12 Corazones, and Primera Impacto, etc. While watching these shows through the years, I began to notice that these shows rarely, or if at all, had Afro-Latin people on the shows as host of shows or news anchors. That's when I started looking into the history of Latin American countries. On this Mahogany Culture and Travel channel, I have done a video about the history of Black people in Mexico that you can look at, that speaks further on the ancient history of Afro-Mexicans. Since the 1910 Mexican Revolution, people of African descent in Mexico were largely excluded from official documentation and national identity. In Mexico, there is a popular expression of mejorar la raza, a phrase that is used in Latin American countries, which means improve the race. It implies that you should marry or have children with a whiter person so you'll have better-looking kids. La raza has historically been used to refer to the mixed-race populations, primarily, though not always exclusively in the Western Hemisphere. For over a century, Mexico maintained a racial ideology known as mestizaje, which promoted the idea of a mixed-race national identity that primarily included indigenous and Spanish ancestry. This ideology effectively erased the presence and contributions of Afro-Mexicans from the country's history and identity. It was not until 2015 that Mexico officially recognized Black Mexicans as citizens of Mexico in a national census, acknowledging them as citizens with distinct Afro-descendant heritage. This was a significant milestone, as it allowed for Afro-Mexicans to be counted in demographic data, leading to a greater push for their rights and inclusion in national policies. However, racism and colorism remain major issues across Latin America, including in Mexico, Brazil, Honduras, Venezuela, and other countries. Many Latin American nations have deeply ingrained anti-Black biases due to their colonial histories, where African enslavement was brought in to work on plantations, mines, and other labor-intensive industries. Despite the abolition of slavery in the 19th century, racial hierarchies persisted, favoring lighter-skinned individuals and reinforcing discrimination against those of African descent. In many Latin American countries, a racial and social hierarchy exists where white or lighter-skinned individuals of Spanish descent hold the most power, wealth, and influence, while darker-skinned individuals, including Afro-descendants and indigenous people, often face systemic discrimination and economic marginalization. Although Mexico has an Afro-descendant population, the government historically confined them to certain regions, often keeping them out of national consciousness. The majority of Afro-Mexicans live in the states of Guerrero, Veracruz. Veracruz is a historic port city where enslaved Africans were brought. Oaxaca and Costa Chica, a coastal region spanning Guerrero and Oaxaca with high concentrations of Afro-Mexicans. These areas have historically been underdeveloped, with poor infrastructure, limited job opportunities, and a lack of government investment. The deliberate neglect of these communities has contributed to the continued marginalization of Black Mexicans. Many Afro-Mexicans in these regions have limited political representation, experience racial profiling, and face difficulties in accessing education and healthcare. In countries like Brazil, where the largest population of Afro-descendants outside Africa resides, systemic racism manifests in disparities in education, employment, and police violence. In Mexico, Afro-Mexicans have historically faced exclusion from political representation, economic opportunities, and social recognition. In Honduras, Garifuna communities, Afro-Indigenous peoples, have suffered from land displacement and violence. In Venezuela, despite a history of Black resistance, Afro-Venezuelans often experience discrimination in social and economic structures. Due to these systemic and cultural issues, Black travelers and expatriates should be cautious when visiting or moving to Latin American countries. While many regions are welcoming, the persistence of racism can affect access to services, treatment by authorities, and general safety. Racial profiling, economic disadvantages, and exclusion from opportunities can make it challenging for Black individuals to navigate these societies. Understanding the history of colonization and its lasting effects can help prepare those who plan to travel or relocate to Latin America, ensuring that they are aware of both the beauty and the challenges that come with experiencing these countries. Tell me what you think about this topic. Hope you find the information in this video informative. Feel free to like, subscribe, share, comment. Thanks for watching.